Instructors at the University of North Carolina launched a petition to delay the start of classes by at least a month, all in the name of public safety. Some required orientation documents at Iowa State University are raising some eyebrows among students, and questions on an AP government practice exam from the College Board imply that voter ID laws are racist. We'll get to that one and so much more on this week's episode. I'm Ophelia Jacobson, and welcome to our back-to-school edition of the Campus Countdown. University of North Carolina instructors started a petition to delay the in-person start date by at least a month prior to the start of classes. Jay Smith, a history professor at UNC and the author of the petition, told Campus Reform that it so far has 484 signatures. This petition comes even though the university has implemented a requirement for students to either get vaccinated against COVID-19 or to go through weekly testing for COVID on campus. Quote, the current plan for UNC, which includes no off-ramp for remote learning, unlike last fall, and no vaccine mandate, is for regular classrooms with no physical distancing, near full dorms, football games with no masks, and full-to-capacity dining halls, the petition states. Quote, this is a formula for disaster. According to the document, switching to online learning for 4 to 6 weeks is, quote, the only moral and compassionate path. In an email, UNC Media Relations told Campus Reform that, quote, the university has layers of safety precautions in place, primarily focused on vaccines, testing, and masks to limit the spread on our campus. It's also important to point out that student vaccination rates at the University of North Carolina currently sit at 87%. The bottom line is this petition isn't about safety or concern for other people's health, it's about power and control. Any of these professors can wear a mask, get vaccinated, and stay 6 feet apart from their students in the classroom. And this is coming straight from a teacher union's playbook. You move the goalposts on COVID safety, you accuse the university of making you feel unsafe on campus, and then you abandon your students. And think about the students in this situation. This is a slap in the face to them as well. They've been out of the classroom for almost a year, and just when they're ready to get back on campus, their professors want to delay the start of in-person classes even more. These students are paying tens of thousands of dollars in tuition costs to be on an American college campus, in the classroom with their peers, and actually learning with their professors in person. This is unfair for students, and it really goes to show that these professors aren't putting the best interest of their students first. And look, this isn't the first time that we've seen professors go out of their way to delay the start of classes. At Clemson University, professors were threatening to walk out on the first day of classes if a mask mandate wasn't implemented. And here at the University of Florida, where I attend school, there's a faculty union on Twitter that was calling on the president of the university to risk his job by implementing a vaccine or a mask mandate, which would go directly against Governor DeSantis's orders. At Arizona State University, they implemented a mask mandate even though Governor Ducey said those types of mandates are banned in the state. It seems as if teachers are worried about anything and everything besides actually getting back in the classroom. It's the start of a new school year. Students deserve to be in the classroom, but apparently vaccines and masks aren't enough for these professors. So we're definitely going to see more of these protests pop up across the country, and Campus Reform will continue to monitor those as well. But the bottom line is it is time for these teachers to get back in the classroom and do their job. Switching gears now, Iowa State University included some documents in its required orientation leader training that are now raising some eyebrows among students. And here to tell us more about those documents and why some students are now calling them woke is Campus Reform correspondent Amanda Mayer.
Thanks, Ophelia. And for our second top story of the week, Iowa State University requires freshman orientation leaders to complete readings on power and privilege, as well as a glossary of inclusive terminology. Now, ISU students are calling the woke required readings, quote, indoctrination and propaganda. The readings include power and privilege definitions, which defines words such as institutional power, prejudice, and stereotype. The required reading also designates the 4 levels of oppression, listing able-bodied, Christian, middle-aged people, and English-speaking people as privileged groups. The document also defines agents of oppression as, quote, members of the dominant social groups in the United States privileged by birth or acquisition, which knowingly or unknowingly exploit and reap unfair advantages over members of groups that are targets of oppression, end quote. The other document, Diversity EDU Glossary of Terms, includes definitions and links to sites such as Privilege 101, a quick and dirty guide. This glossary is similar to other lists published by schools, including Brandeis and Texas A&M University, which aim to condition speech on campus. So, I have a few questions for ISU. Are these required readings that divide students as oppressors and oppressed really beneficial? Do the school's administrators truly believe that this division will somehow create a more unified and productive school environment? And why is a public university that is funded by taxpayer dollars taking a stance on religion, as the document also labels Christians as an oppressive group? The short answer is that social justice has now been prioritized over academics. Lastly, does the university not realize the hypocrisy of their own statement? The document clearly categorizes, quote, middle and owning class people as privileged, and by their own warped definition, are unearned. Yet, the average ISU graduate will make $53,000 a year, which according to the U.S. Department of Education College Scorecard is 57% higher than the national median. So according to ISU's own logic, their students who work hard to graduate and have a diploma in the hopes of attaining a well-paying job in the future are privileged. We have seen liberal bias and indoctrination run rampant on college campuses. Universities such as ISU are creating division and classifications among their students rather than building unity. Colleges and universities would benefit much more had they put their time, money, and effort into academia rather than social justice.
Thanks, Amanda. And moving on to our top story of the week, questions from a practice exam written by the College Board imply that election integrity laws are discriminatory against African Americans. Questions from an advanced placement U.S. government and politics practice exam likely center upon the left-leaning narrative about election reform bills. The exam states that approximately 1 in 4 African Americans do not have a government photo ID, a significantly higher rate than the population at large. So let's take a quick look at the questions. The first question we'll be looking at states, based on the infographic, which of the following claims would an opponent of state voter ID laws most likely make? A. Voter ID laws are likely to decrease turnout among African American voters because they are less likely to have government-issued IDs. B. Voter turnout will likely decrease by 10% if voters are required to present a government-issued ID to vote. C. Voter ID laws will likely decrease election fraud, which will increase voter confidence in institutions and thereby increase turnout. D. African American voters who do not have government-issued IDs are likely to participate at the grassroots level and exert influence through channels other than turning out to vote. The correct answer is A. Voter ID laws are likely to decrease turnout among African American voters. The next question, question 23, then asks, based on the infographic, which of the following strategies would a group seeking to increase turnout likely pursue? A. Use radio ads to advocate stricter voter ID laws. B. Hold a voter registration drive in public high schools. C. Lobby state legislators to overturn voter ID legislation. Or D. Lobby Congress to eliminate the Voting Rights Act. The correct answer in this case is answer C, lobby state legislators to overturn voter ID legislation. Look, I took AP Government in high school, and from what I remember the questions being pretty fair and balanced, but in this instance, it seems as if the questions on this practice exam are lending itself to be closed-minded and only open to one viewpoint, which is that voter ID laws are racist. And in an AP Government course, you would expect them to really try and reflect the current state of American politics on the practice exam and on the actual exam as well. And the reality that this College Board is ignoring is the fact that according to a Rasmussen poll, 75% of likely American voters believe that citizens, quote, should be required to show photo identification such as a driver's license before being allowed to vote. And African Americans were no exception at the poll. They rejected the idea that voter ID laws, quote, discriminate against black voters and other minorities by a nearly 2-to-1 margin according according to the breakdown. This is the reality that the College Board should actually be trying to show their students instead of trying to push their leftist agenda in these multiple choice questions. And let's take one step back. AP courses by design were created to expose high school students to the type of college thinking and understanding that they would have to go through on campus. And with all the liberal bias and indoctrination that we see on a day-to-day basis, I would say this practice exam is doing a pretty good job because it's exposing these students to the same type of indoctrination that they're going to experience on college campuses. And this is only a preview of what they're going to have to go through. And this isn't the first time that the College Board has expressed its liberal bias before. Campus Reform has reported on the organization multiple times. And what we found is that the nonprofit that administers the SAT and holds a near monopoly over American college admissions leans heavily to the left. Nearly 99% of individual political contributions coming from people associated with the College Board went to Democratic candidates during the 2020 election cycle. Well, it seems as if indoctrination is beginning even earlier than we would have expected, in part thanks to the College Board. The bottom line is teaching is no longer nonpartisan. Everything and everyone has an agenda, and that agenda tends to lean to the left. It's time that we really return to the foundations of American education. And one light in this whole situation is that, thankfully, the College Board does publish these practice exams on their website, so we're able to see just how bad the indoctrination is getting and what we can do to fight back against it. And now for everyone's favorite part of the episode, our woke tweet of the week. And this week's tweet is brought to you by a Boston University epidemiologist and professor who took to Twitter to question the assumption that schools need to stay open during the COVID-19 pandemic. Quote, "We shouldn't be acting like no schools is a completely unprecedented, unknowable scenario. It was normal life for most of human history," Dr. Eleanor Murray tweeted. Murray's first post in the thread asks, quote, "Maybe all your grandparents had high school, but what about your great-grandparents? Yes, education is important, but it's a pandemic." Murray told Campus Reform that she was attempting to provide historical context for schooling in her tweets. Quote, "My tweet was intended to remind people that for most of human history, full-day schooling was basically unheard of, and so it's unreasonable to act as if we don't know what missing school will do to children's development," she said. Murray also expressed her support for, quote, "mandatory indoor mask wearing as well as vaccines for educators." Quote, "Children will also benefit from our taking actions to curb community spread, like closing bars and restaurants for the next couple of months until a vaccine is available to the under 12 crowd," she added. The ironic part is that this is coming from an epidemiologist, a scientist. If she were really committed to following the science, then she would recognize that younger children are at a much lower risk for contracting the virus and even developing serious cases of COVID-19. And the really mystifying part of this all is how students like me were able to miss out on an entire year of school and no one even blinked an eye. Why is no one talking about the long-term effects, the mental health problems, and the decrease in learning capabilities that this year of online school has on students? Those are all the top stories we have for you this week. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to give this video a like, comment, and subscribe, and feel free to share this episode with a friend who's going back to school. And if you want to follow along with all of the college craziness happening across the country, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Campus Reform. We'll be back next week, as always, with another episode of the Campus Countdown. But for now, I'm Ophelia Jacobson. Thanks for watching.